Um, Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good.
How are you doing, folks? I mean, like, this is a really incredible film. This is a really incredible piece of work, and it, I think, quite necessarily doesn't really allow folks to read. How did you come to this story in particular?
Well, it really started in September, on September 21st, 2011, when Troy Davis was executed. And Troy Davis was a black man executed in a Georgia state prison. And leading up to his execution, hundreds of thousands of people around the world were protesting against his execution, including a handful of retired wardens and directors of corrections. And they all band together and wrote a letter to the Georgia governor pleading for clemency, not just on the grounds of potential innocence, but they spoke to the emotional and psychological consequences they knew from firsthand experience killing Troy would have on those who were responsible for physically carrying out the execution. And so the morning after he was executed, I, like many, many other people, were feeling a lot of things, frustration and sadness and anger and all kinds of things. And I just asked myself, if we're experiencing and navigating these kind of complexities of emotions, what must it be like for the people who had to carry out the execution? You know, what is it like for your livelihood to be tied to the taking of human life? And that question just stuck with me since 2011. And in 2013, I really committed myself to researching and writing this story.
And committing yourself meant that you actually you kind of embedded yourself in this movement. You interviewed wardens. Tell me how they responded to your request to talk about this.
The first thing I did, I was living in New York City at the time. I spoke with a lot of the wardens and directors of corrections who wrote the letter. I spoke with men and women who were incarcerated, who are incarcerated, death row lawyers, chaplains, a variety of corrections officials. And some people were willing to talk, some people were not willing to talk, some people were triggered, some people were an open book. But that was just kind of skimming the surface. I moved from New York to Ohio, and I volunteered on a total of about 14 clemency cases, and spoke with many more people who are kind of in this world, and that really led me to develop a passion for advocating for people who are incarcerated. And because of that passion, I created a film program in a women's prison in Ohio where I taught incarcerated women to make their own short films from script to screen. So all of that really informed the film, informed the work. But I remember going to talking to wardens and directors of corrections with Alfred in Ohio and visiting a lot of prisons there. And for some people who were speaking to us, it was the first time that they actually talked about this kind of stuff. We talked to men who are currently on death row, and them kind of just releasing some of their own fears and anxieties and frustrations and anger. It was really therapeutic and cathartic, and I was just really honored that so many people were able to share.
Was there anything in that process that surprised you, since it was coming from sort of a perspective that we don't often hear?
I don't think anything really. I mean, it didn't. I don't know if surprise is a strong word, but the amount of emotional detachment to this process that is part of the system and is part of the horror of this prison space and the horror of this process, and I guess it surprised me a little about how it's by design.
You mentioned Alfred Woodard, who was amazing in this film, and going and talking to incarcerated folks with her. What was that like? I mean, that's character analysis. What was that like?
Well, many of the people that we spoke with, I had already spoken to, and spent some time with and doing work, and so a lot of it was for her, and this was the first time that she had ever been in maximum security prisons with men. This is the first time that she'd ever talked to people who are currently on death row. This is the first time that she really talked extensively with wardens and people who work within the prison system. So she was raw, and she was, she spoke about this yesterday, that it was an emotionally overwhelming experience, but it was so incredibly important, and I kind of required that she take the trip and required that Aldous spend time in San Quentin prison and talk with men who are currently on death row and see people's humanities. And I know that both of them, especially Alfie, really drew from that experience in their performance.
And one thing that really strikes me about the film is that the way that you use silence. Silence is very powerful. And tell me about how you thought about using silence in this film.
Well, I thought about silence in a couple different ways. One, I really wanted to take my time in this world because I really felt like time means something different when you're within the prison space. It means something different for people who work there. It means something different when you are serving a life sentence or when you don't know when you're about to die. It means something different when you get the death warrant and the clock is ticking. And so I really wanted to play with time in that way. And I also wanted to kind of force audiences to sit with the emotional moments of the characters in real time and to allow yourself to experience their emotional evolution as they're experiencing it as well.
Can you talk a little bit about just how this has been received? This will be released in December. Tell me about how audiences are reacting.
For the most part, it's been a very kind of visceral reaction in really positive ways. I think a lot of people coming in don't quite know what they're getting. And a lot of people might think, I don't know if you all were feeling that way, but I think that there are a lot of people who think it's going to be one thing, especially they come in with their own kind of tropes about quote unquote the prison drama, and they walk away like, oh shit, is not it.
Well, why was that important though? Why was it important to sort of like, just knock down people's notions of what a prison is like and what a prison film can be?
Because for a couple different reasons. I think I wanted to capture this space in the most realistic and human way as possible. That's why there's very little music, because I don't want to emotionally manipulate you. And it's amazing, it's amazingly powerful to me how many people feel so deeply without, in my opinion, being told how to feel, but you can't help but, feel something. My experience, my experience working and teaching in prisons is how much I'm struck by how mundane it is, how boring it is, and it's by design as well, and that's also part of the horror. And I really wanted audiences to feel that and to experience this space and to not sugarcoat it, and so we can really understand that this is our reality in this country in particular, and so yeah.
So why was it important that the warden was a Black woman? To me, that really struck me, that, this story comes across differently because it is a Black woman. So tell me about that decision.
To be honest with you, I didn't really think much of it. I'm like, why not? I think white maleness is normalized, and if the warden was a white man, I don't think one single person would ask me why he's a white man. The majority of wardens in Ohio, for example, are Black women. It's just a reality. And there's a female wardens union or association, and so why not? And I am really I am excited about this. I'm excited about having a protagonist whose narrative is not solely defined by race and gender. I'm excited to have this film be where there's a Black woman at the center, and she has a storyline, and she has an emotional arc, and she's human, and she's complex, and she's not necessarily likable, but you get it emotionally and psychologically, and she's not a mammy, and she's not a mule, and she is not coddling the emotional insecurities of a man, and neither is Yvette, the ex-girlfriend. I love that, and I just really get excited about seeing that.
And Yvette's character was really powerful too. her decision to not apologize for the decision that she made in regards to the son. What role do you think families play in this and in sort of the fight against the death penalty?
Well, I mean, I think that my intention in bringing in families was to show how families are also in some ways incarcerated as well and experience a kind of emotional or emotional kind of imprisonment, you know, and that's with either side, you know, and what we see with the parents of the person who was killed, it's just, you know, they're also kind of stuck in this space, and with Anthony's ex-girlfriend, it's like she's been holding this in her heart, and so everybody is kind of affected by this carceral system, and I wanted to show that.
So tell me about what your prison activism looks like today. This film is out. Are you still going into prisons? I don't think you'll be able to screen this inside of a prison.
I don't think I would want to. I'm afraid it'd be too triggering. I mean, right now I am really kind of thinking about so the program I created in Ohio is called Pens to Pictures. And so what I'm constantly thinking about is like, what does it look like to expand the program elsewhere? I don't live in Ohio anymore, but the inaugural class of women, they've all been released from prison, and so we are having conversations about, okay, so how can they continue the work in Ohio if they want to continue the work? I don't even know if they want to stay in Ohio after, you know. And after a couple of years, but like, what does it look like to continue it on? There are a lot of the ladies are still involved in filmmaking and still writing and directing, and they're phenomenal and educators. And so I'm thinking about that, and just loosely just talking to potential funders who would be interested in expanding it to other parts of the country, and trying to figure out how do I, so it doesn't have to just lean on me, but how do I empower other people to expand the program on their own? And just kind of like lay out a blueprint model, and then people can go ahead and do it on their own.
Well, thank you all for coming through to this Q&A. We're actually going to continue this across the street at Manny's. We're going to have some drinks.
Oh, there's no audience Q&A?
There's no, also, I actually have a couple of minutes, but we have a hard out.
You have a hard out?
We have time. Okay, well, let's do it now. Let's do it now. Does anyone want to start us off?
There are so many emotional scenes throughout this movie. What do you think was the most challenging for you to shoot?
The most challenging scene to shoot. So challenging can be different things. Challenging production-wise, challenging emotionally, challenging directorially. I would say that on an emotional level, the hardest thing to shoot was the scene where Anthony attempts suicide. I think I did a pretty good job emotionally compartmentalizing on, you know, when it came time to make the film, and I was about business and logistics. But I struggled with serious depression when I was a teenager, and almost took my own life when I was 14. And since then, you know, I've been on a very intentional journey of embracing my joy and doing a lot of soul work. And so I felt like, okay, a lot of my kind of stuff was processed, but watching that scene on set, I just broke down and sobbed, and it just triggered something in me, that loneliness, that kind of, that futile kind of suffering that I was experiencing just all came flooding back, and I saw myself in Anthony in that moment, and that was really difficult.
Right here in the white shirt.
What prison did you film that?
So we actually filmed it in defunct jail, a large defunct jail that we kind of expanded through movie magic in East LA called Sybil Brandt, and it shut down, I believe, in 2014.
Does it look like?
Thank you. Thank you.
Over here.
I wanted to ask a little bit about how Alfred got attached to the project, and what point did she get brought in?
So Alfred was attached 2 years before we went into pre-production, and it was just a matter of sending the script to her team, and her team and Alfred responding immediately, and we had a conversation about my directorial intentions, and She was in. Yeah, she channeled something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ooh, great.
I love the way you describe, about that you have this intentionality, but also of moving on to another stage, a bigger stage, and then, but making sure your ripples can keep going or picked up by somebody else. But also in this movie, there was a very strong emphasis about people at the end of their careers.
Yeah.
So how, as a director, did you relate to that space between you?
I actually, you mean how did I relate to the people at the end of their careers and like the retiring kind of theme and stuff like that?
Yes, because they're all at actually the scene you talk about where he bangs his head
Yeah.
on the wall, that was very traumatic here too,
Yeah.
to me to see. And I saw it also a piece of trying to control your own fate again in a place that you
Yeah.
can't do anything. But then also all these other folks that the emphasis was they're all looking backwards.
Yeah.
And you're looking forwards as a
Yeah.
director into all this.
Well, the way that I related it, so when right around the time we got greenlit for this film, I've been a film professor for over 10 years. And right around the time we were getting greenlit was when I was feeling kind of in my heart and my spirit it was time for me to transition from teaching for a moment and kind of really transition into a new chapter of my life. And so I think about, the scene where Bernadine and Jonathan are sitting at their table and Bernadine asks him, how did you know when it's time for you to retire? And he says that he realized that he was giving so much of himself to his students. That was me. And I realized that I was giving almost everything of myself to my students, and I was at that point emotionally where I felt like I had nothing left for myself. And so I had to make a transition and a change. And I feel like everybody, I don't see people at the end, I see people in a transition. And so that's how I relate to it, in that transition and that kind of evolution where people have to step into the natural kind of next phase of their life. And it's scary too, no matter what stage that is. And so that's how I kind of saw myself in that theme, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's great.
It's just like tagging on to that, I mean, you actually stated that emotion twice in the film because the retiring lawyer said what, some fabulous line that made me laugh as a person who taught college and loved it. So
Yeah, it was, yeah,
it was very present.
thank you.
Couple more questions?
My question's about forgiveness. Like who gets to give it, who gets to receive forgiveness? Why did you decide to have Anthony forgive?
Say that again?
Yeah, why did you decide to have Anthony forgive the end?
With his last hit. So a couple reasons. For me, I believe that forgiveness is not necessarily about the other person. That sometimes forgiveness can be about unburdening your own kind of heart a bit, and it's not about the other person. You don't have to ever engage with them or like them or whatever, but it's this kind of letting go and relinquishing that kind of hold that the person's actions or that person might have on you. And so that's one of the reasons why I had Anthony kind of evolve into that space. The other thing is that his final speech, his last words are Troy Davis's last words. And so that was my kind of homage and tribute to Troy as well.
There's a question in the back right here.
Obviously it left out the kind of just her walking out, but why didn't she want to do this career in your head? Like, why would she want to stay instead of trying to have the president and not want to deal with this whole thing?
Well, it's what Troy says to her husband. This is a profession. This is her career, and she's been in this for many years. And when you're in this system for many years, I mean, you could look up and realize, oh my God, it's been 20 years, and you get comfortable and you have benefits and you're committed and you're dedicated, and this process will happen with or without her. And if she believes that she can be the one at the forefront of this process in as quote unquote dignified and compassionate way as possible, then she's gonna be that person.
One more question. You're dying to get it. Or we can go to Manny's.
Are you all gonna go to Manny's?
And drink.
And drink? Are the drinks free?
The drinks are free.
And the drinks are
The
free.
drinks are
Is there
free.
food?
There's food.
And there's food?
There's food, so get some drinks, get some food, and let the questions flow.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.